Our world has changed in profound ways over the last couple decades. I want to know if y'all have experienced this, if y'all have seen this also. That's why I'm bringing this stuff up, because I find myself mourning a past that no longer exists. The old world that I grew up in is simply not there anymore. And things have changed so much that I don't even recognize this world I exist in. It's like I was picked up from my old timeline and thrown into this new one, and just, I was thrown there and said, hey, you know what? Here's your new timeline. Just deal with it. Go along with it and act like nothing has changed. Pretend everything's exactly the way it was before and just live your life. But I don't know about y'all, but I refuse to ignore this stuff. I refuse to just go along with it and turn a blind eye and pretend like everything's exactly the way it's been all along. And the stuff I'm going to talk about, it specifically relates to our planet, the world around us, and I'm going to do my very best to remove all bias, all conjecture from this conversation, and I'm only going to focus on the facts, the observable facts that I've been noticing, and I have in fact been documenting for several years now, because I've noticed this stuff is happening, and I wanted to capture it because I knew this day would come. I knew it would get to the point where the change would be impossible to ignore, and the facts would be so in our face that it would have to eventually be discussed. And I wanted proof to be able to back it up, to back up the fact that things haven't always been this way. And here's the proof that things are drastically different. And I know for a fact, after talking to people about this, that I am not the only person to notice this. There are thousands, if not millions of people catching on to this stuff, because it's so in our face. It's impossible to ignore. So the first thing that I want to dive into is the sun. Am I the only one that remembers the sun being yellow and not white? When I think back at my childhood, the sun was always yellow. I think about the drawings and stuff I made in elementary school, and you would color the sun in with a crown and stuff. It was always a yellow crown. It was never a white crown. And I look back at some of my photos from that time period growing up, and they had a yellow tint to them. I mean, look at my environment right now. It is a hyper white, bright white color. And if we are led to believe that we're simply misremembering, maybe the old photos are faded, maybe the way that cameras took pictures back in the day is different, it still does not explain the fact that when we look back throughout history, all of the ancient text, literature, and illustrations depict the sun as being yellow, orange, or gold. And something else that actually made me think about this the other day, I was looking online for lamps because I'm trying to buy a natural light lamp for my lake house. And if you look at natural light, it's a yellowish color. It is not a white LED style color. It doesn't make sense to me. I've heard a lot of people talking about this too. A lot of people talk about the fact that when they were growing up, back before, I would say, the 90s, the sun was always yellow. And another thing about the sun, I'm sure a lot of y'all have been made aware of this, is there's a lot of solar flares going on right now. It's like every other day we have a solar flare. And the sun is so hot and it's putting off so much radiation that I have plants and stuff that are being burned by it. I mean, plants are outside. They're supposed to be able to withstand the sun. They thrive on that stuff. But now all of a sudden I have plants that are literally withering away and the leaves are burning off of them because the sun seems like it's too hot. And that directly ties into the next thing that I've noticed. And this one is very profound to me because I'll give you a little backstory on this, okay? I've always wanted to see the Northern Lights. I traveled all around Iceland, Norway, Alaska, all these northern places where the Northern Lights are supposed to be, trying to see the Northern Lights. And I did this for several years off and on, for weeks, and sometimes up to like a month or so at a time, trying to see these Northern Lights. Never in my life have I seen the Northern Lights in a place where you're supposed to be able to see them. I came back from traveling all around these areas, and within a few months, I saw the Northern Lights for the first time here in Kentucky. And when that happened, I started documenting it. And every single time an article pops up, which is almost daily, talking about where to see the Northern Lights tonight, in the United States, and it's usually like 16 to 20 some states as far down as Florida, I screenshot that article and I save it. So it is literally almost every single week that we are able to see the northern lights here in the US. Usually it's as far down as Tennessee. Occasionally it's as far down as Florida. I'm 41 years old, and in my 41 years, I never remember seeing the northern lights anywhere in Kentucky or anywhere in the United States, the continental United States anyway, for as long as I've lived, especially not as far down as Tennessee, especially not in Kentucky or Florida. But now all of a sudden, this is something else that's been normalized. And when this is put out to us, it's just an article that says, hey, go out and see the northern lights tonight. Here's your new opportunity to see them. And it's like it's no big deal. It's totally normal to see the northern lights down in Florida. You know, no big deal. Just move along. Nothing to see here. I mean, that's wild to me. And something else that ties into the northern lights and the sun and all the stuff in the, I guess you would say, in the sky. What about the moon? All right, the moon is something that has been freaking me out here lately. So there's a thing called a wet moon, and that is when the moon basically turns up like a U, like this. And they call it a wet moon. It goes back to, you know, the native times and stuff, because it's shaped like a bowl and it could hold water. That is supposed to be kind of a rare event. Like, you usually only see a wet moon a few times a year, and it's usually in the winter and the spring, because the way the earth tilts, it kind of changes our perspective of how we view the moon. But that has been happening. Again, this is one of those things where it's like almost every other week. And I've been pointing this out to people. Look at the moon. Is that normal? Do you remember seeing it that way? And people are like, I've never seen it like that. And people usually don't realize it until they look up and they actually view the moon, because most of us don't look up anymore. We always have our head down for numerous reasons. But when they look up and they start to notice, they notice it often. And I'm here to tell you that I've been noticing this for at least 5 years, maybe actually more than that. I've been taking pictures of it. I've seen it as far down as Florida. I've got pictures of it in Georgia. I see it here in Kentucky all the time, literally every month. And sometimes it's numerous nights in a row. And it's not like it starts out as a wet moon and it eventually tilts because our perspective changes. It's a wet moon all day and night. When it comes up and it goes back down, it is a wet moon. So what is happening? What is leading to that? And why is it so common now? And I highly encourage you, if you're not paying attention to the sky, please stop and take some time to look up, because there's a lot of stuff going on in our skies that we are just oblivious to because we never look up. We never view the sky. We always have our head down. And another thing that you're going to see when you look up is the fact that clouds have changed. Back when I was growing up, clouds were fluffy. I remember laying in the backyard and we would stare up at the clouds and we would think about what they look like. Oh, look, that one looks like a bunny rabbit, or that one looks like a lion lying down, or, you know, fill in the blank. It looks like something. But today, when you look up, it's nothing but lines in the sky. And those lines, here at my house anyway, they start at about 9 a.m. Sometimes they run all night, but usually they start at about 9 a.m. It'll be a bluebird sky, just like it is right now. This is a very rare occasion, by the way, because this is usually not the case. This is how it starts out at about 7 a.m. But by 9, there are lines in the sky. And by 2 or 3, it's basically smog. There's this thick cloud that just spreads across the sky, and it blocks out the sun. I've also been documenting this for several years now, and I have seen and actually caught on video not just air freighters, like not just the big planes with jet engines doing this. I caught 2 military prop planes flying over my house side by side, leaving these lines in the sky at a fairly low altitude. And in addition to the clouds and the moon and the sun and the northern lights, something else that seemed to have started this year is that we have had wind every single day this year. There has literally not been a single day in 2026 where it has not been windy. Today is a prime example of that. The wind is gusting. It's just the way things are now. And personally, I'm not a huge fan of the wind because it's kind of annoying when you're outside trying to do something and it's gusting you all around. It just annoys the crap out of me. But for some reason, it's windy every single day. And there is no exception to that. Something else that recently happened is an article popped up in my feed the other day talking about how Tornado Alley has now moved from Kansas and out west all the way over to the state of Kentucky, where I'm at, and Tennessee, and this area. And it kind of makes sense because we've already had a couple tornadoes this year. And while we're on the topic of things shifting, something else that has happened that I've also been reading into and researching is the fact that true north, or magnetic north should I say, has actually shifted from where it was basically over the North Pole all the way down over to Siberia. And they're saying now that the North Pole has basically shifted at unprecedented rates to the point that they're having to update the GPS systems all the time now because it's moving so fast. And knowing that a lot of animals and bugs and various things in nature rely on the magnetic fields, and they rely on the moon and the solar cycles and all this stuff to basically navigate, breed, and live life, I feel like there's also been a shift in bugs and specific things throughout nature. We're seeing now where these oarfish and stuff are coming up on beaches, which oarfish historically have only been found in the deep. It is very, very rare that you see these things, but now they're surfacing all over the place. I've also recently had my house swarmed with these giant beetles. This was actually just a couple weeks ago. I thought it was hailing outside. It was nighttime, and I heard something smashing against the back of my house, and I got up. I was like, what the heck is that? So I go out to the back, and I turn on the light out back, and there were thousands and thousands of these brown beetles just swarming my house. I'm talking they were everywhere. And again, I've been around 41 years. I've never seen anything like that. And something else that ties into that is that when I was growing up, I grew up on a farm, and we had several farm ponds on my farm, and I used to love to fish. So I'd go out there and I would fish and catch like yellow belly catfish and bluegills and stuff. And what I always did was catch hordes. I'm talking buckets full of grasshoppers. And I would take those out to the pond and use those for bait. And back then you could go out into the field and literally catch buckets full of grasshoppers within just a couple minutes. But it is very, very rare that I see grasshoppers anymore. It's like the bug population has dwindled down to almost nothing. Back then there used to be lightning bugs all over the place and June bugs, and me and my brother would be running around the yard catching those things. We'd put them in jars and play with them. Last year was the first time I saw June bugs in probably 2 decades. And this year's the first year I've had lightning bugs, a significant amount of lightning bugs anyway, and as long as I can remember. And I actually read an article not too long ago saying that this generation that we have right now might be the last generation to experience lightning bugs. And with the mass die-off of bees and butterflies and all that stuff that is happening, it really makes me wonder what has changed. What is it that has caused the bug population to collapse? And what does that mean for us? And speaking of population collapse, there is a creek near my childhood home that I used to play in all the time growing up. And there were some of the biggest crawfish in this thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. And not were they huge, but there were thousands of them. You'd be walking in that creek and you just see them fly up in the water and just swim away from your feet. I'm talking the most crawfish I've probably ever seen. And as I grew older, I used to actually go out there and fish, and I would catch smallmouth bass. The last time I fished in that creek and actually caught something, it was probably somewhere around 2007, somewhere around that time frame. Me and a buddy went out there and we caught 40 some smallmouth apiece. Now, since then, I went back out there to fish, and I also take my dog out there to swim around and stuff sometimes. And I have never caught a single fish since back when we were actually catching fish. When I go out there now, not only are there no smallmouth, the only fish I see in there are the small chubs and minnows. All the snails and stuff that used to get down in my shoes when we'd be walking around in that creek, they're not there anymore. Now it's nothing but rocks. There's a few snails here and there, and you might see a few crawfish, but it is very few and far between. Within the last 20 to 30 years, that creek has changed completely. And again, it makes me wonder, What in the world has changed? What is causing it? And it's kind of crazy to think about, because where some populations have collapsed, other populations have absolutely exploded. Things like the tick population, and I would say the population of things that we probably don't want, like the invasive species and all the pests and stuff out there, those populations have literally taken over. I cannot walk outside anymore without getting ticks on me. I came out this morning and I had to walk around the edge of my woods, so I put bug spray on, which I don't like doing because that stuff is toxic, but I put it on my pants and I still had ticks crawling on my pants. I went fishing with a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and it was about an hour from my house in the middle of nowhere, but a beautiful area, very country, very serene. And we were out there in kayaks having a great time. We decided to fish in a pond that was kind of further back. So we got in the truck, we drove back there, and we walked from the truck to the pond, which was maybe 20 yards. I got halfway around this pond, which is probably about an acre, and I felt something crawling on my hand. So I looked down and I'm like, oh man, I got a tick on me. And my buddy's like, oh really, I haven't got any on me yet. I'm like, yeah, I got one on me. And then I felt something crawling on the palm of my hand. So I flipped my hand over and there's a really big tick crawling on my hand. And I look down, I kid you not, I look down and I am covered in hundreds and hundreds of ticks. This is no joke, no exaggeration. I ran back to the truck. He had a white truck. I got in the bed of that truck, stripped down into my underwear, and for 30 minutes straight, I picked ticks out of my clothes. I'm talking out of the pockets of my pants. They were inside the seams of my pants on the inside. They were in my socks, under my feet, like I was literally walking on ticks. These things were everywhere. I coated the bed of his truck in ticks. And luckily they weren't attached, but they were crawling all over me. And it wasn't just the small ticks. It was a mixture of the big ticks and the small ticks. And I'm no stranger to ticks. I have probably had 12 ticks attached to me this year alone, if not more. My dog has probably had 20 or more attached to us. We take precautions. We're very careful about it. But there are just ticks everywhere. I've always lived in the country. Like I mentioned before, I grew up on a farm. I spent a lot of my childhood and my adolescent years ginseng hunting and stuff because I used to sell that stuff. So I probably hiked thousands upon thousands of miles through the woods over the years. And I've gotten ticks on me before. As a matter of fact, I got hundreds of turkey mites on me one time back when I was probably about 18, 20 years old. But never in my life have I gotten this amount of ticks on me as what we have seen in recent years. Speaking of ticks, here I am sitting in my own yard, and lo and behold, I got a tick crawling up me. It's crawling on my back. Can't even sit in my own yard without having a tick get on me and crawl down me. This is insane, y'all, insane. It was so bad at that place that we went to fish that when we went to leave, we drug the kayaks from the pond to the truck, which again was maybe 10, 15 yards, put the kayaks in the back. My buddy gets in the truck and he's like, all right, well, let's see how many ticks we find on the drive home, just joking around. He looks down and then he yells at me, dude, I'm covered in ticks. He jumps out of the truck. He pulled around 30 ticks off him just within that distance. I looked down. I pulled over 20 off me. And that is what we face right now. I've been seeing videos now of people finding these dead moose and stuff out in the woods that are just completely covered in thousands upon thousands of ticks. I've been seeing videos of people finding snakes that are covered in ticks. It is absolutely crazy.
Utah moose are being, get this, sucked to death by ticks. And wildlife managers are trying to do something about the disgusting problem. The Utah Department of Natural Resources says during warm winters like our last one, ticks aren't killed off in the cold. In turn, they have more time to suck blood out of the moose. And
there is not one day that has gone by since the warm weather has started that I have not found ticks on either myself or on my dog. And the ticks have gotten so bad that I even find them on my dog and sometimes on myself in the winter. And I have found them on me when there's literally snow on the ground. And the common explanation that I keep hearing is that the warm weather and the milder winters is causing the tick population to explode. But I'm here to tell you, here in Kentucky, we had the longest deep freeze winter with ice and snow on the ground for a consecutive period of time than we've had in probably 2 decades. And you would think that that would kill the tick population off, considering that the highs were like in the single digits. But somehow there are more ticks this year than I've ever experienced. And now there's this explosion of alpha-gal syndrome, which makes you allergic to red meat.
Well, a newer kind of tick-borne illness that presents as a sudden allergy to eating meat is starting to become more common on Long Island.
All right, Fox 5's Judah Goldberg breaks down what to know about alpha-gal syndrome and why we're seeing more cases.
There's this explosion of Lyme disease.
Ticks are a growing threat for outdoor recreation, with Lyme disease cases expected to rise this year.
And all of these tick-borne illnesses. As a matter of fact, there's a new disease, I can't remember the name of it, but it is now taking off. And I personally know several people that have Lyme disease. They're saying now that the rates of alpha-gal are now, I think 450,000 people in the US have been diagnosed with it. And there has been an 86% increase in tick-related visits to the emergency room this year.
Yeah, the CDC says ER visits for tick bites this time of year are high for our region than they have been in almost a decade.
This is not how things were when I was growing up. As a matter of fact, growing up on a farm, it was a rare occasion that I got ticks on me. It wasn't until I moved out into this very wooded area that I started seeing more ticks. But the amount of ticks I see now is on a completely different level. And something else that ties directly into this is just the fact that my perception of time and the overall feel of, I would say, almost everything, just the world around me, has changed completely. Things simply do not feel the same. My perception of time has shifted. Time doesn't pass by slowly anymore. The days never drag by. They speed by at a rate that is, I would say, unprecedented. I have tried and tried over the last couple years to slow time down and to get back to time feeling the way that it did before, and I simply can't get there. There are certain things that I found that do slow time down, but nothing gets it back to the way it was before. And when it comes to the overall feeling of the atmosphere around us, I can't really describe that. It's something I can't even put into words. It's just a gut feeling, almost like an intuition. Like there's something lurking in the background, just out of sight, that we can't quite see or touch, but we can feel it. And what really amplifies that feeling is the fact that I remember a past that no longer exists. And a lot of people out there remember that same past. And now we're told that what we remember is no longer true. Don't believe your lying eyes. And this blows my mind because there's a lot of stuff that's being called out, like Mandela effects, that some of these things I remember specifically, and I know in my mind and in my heart of hearts that they were a certain way, and now we're being told that it was never that way. And nothing to see here, just move on. You're just delusional. You're making all this stuff up. It's just all in your head. That's what we're told. But I refuse to believe that. I refuse to just go along with it and pretend that nothing has changed. Because, I mean, there are certain examples of this where me and my friends had running jokes in our social circle that revolved around some of these things that have now become Mandela effects. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, how is it that it was a running joke for 20, 30 years within my friend group, but somehow it never existed in the first place? To me, that just doesn't make sense. And it would be one thing if I was just experiencing one or two of these things, but the fact that it's all these things combined and they all seem to be kind of related, it really leaves me wondering if it's all leading towards something. If eventually we're going to reach a crescendo and whatever all this stuff's building to comes to fruition. And what's wild is I feel like I probably only just scratched the surface on what is truly going on. And that's why I want y'all to share what you've been experiencing. Have you too been witnessing this stuff? And have you been witnessing other things that maybe I didn't touch on? And I think it's also fundamentally important that we document this stuff, because it's not going to be long before we're left defending a past that we can no longer prove, because things are changing at such unprecedented rates and we're just told to go along with it, that eventually it's just going to be normalized. All these things are going to happen and it's just going to be the way things are. We'll be told to ignore it. And for anybody who speaks out against it, they're going to be labeled a conspiracy theorist. So the only way we're going to be able to prove that this past exists and that these changes have in fact occurred is if we document this stuff, if we talk about it and share it, and if we make sure that people are aware. Because the problem with society today is that people are largely unaware. People spend way too much time on social media. They spend way too much time in the digital realm with their face stuck in their phone and in their screens. That a lot of this stuff that goes on is vastly ignored. It's vastly overlooked. So I feel like the best thing we can do is just to help people become aware. Help people realize that there is an entire world out there that exists around every single one of us, and that world is changing. Help people realize that the sky is very big. None of us look at it. And help people realize that there's a lot of stuff going on up there that nobody's paying attention to. And if we don't pay attention, somewhere in the not so distant future, we're just going to have to accept that this is just the way things are. And the past that we once knew, it won't exist anymore. And we will have no way to prove that it ever existed in the first place.